Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Xaereth Prevails, an alternate accounts story. I've been trying to decide what I want to do with my alt account videos because I want to be able to show this GP level. The 2 million GP level is way different than the 5.3 that I'm at on my main account, but I can't devote enough time to be able to show you guys a video for every single match for my alt account, and that's just really not plausible for me at this moment, at least. But I feel like my old videos have not really done any of them justice. I've only been showing really fast forwarded takes on things, and the battles get over quick, and I can't really give you guys the kind of in-depth analysis I normally like to do. And so one thing that I really want to do this time, I want to try something different, and that's going to be trying to just focus on one specific match and then just do like a quick 300% speed on the rest of the matches, so you guys can get a brief overview of what's been going on, what's been happening, and then I can slow it down and really show you guys, one really solid match to be able to show you my decision-making process and the matchups involved and everything. And in this video, that's going to be the final match. And so you guys can hang on and watch the really super fast-forwarded battles. You can skip forward to the more in-depth one, your call. I will be providing voice analysis even through the really fast ones, but it'll be more of a play-by-play instead of analysis. Anyways, I've been having a lot of fun with my alt account matches at this division, at this level. There's a lot of different opponents that you're going to face. Some of them are really good, some of them are frankly not. And anyways, I've been winning a lot, and I sometimes feel a little bit like Bernie Mac.
Political analysts say this may be too little, too late.
Hi, I'm with the Port Commission.
I'm from the Athlete's Foot Foundation.
Brother. Hey, can you get my demo tape to somebody?
I don't always insult my opponents, but when I do, I apparently use Bernie Mac sometimes. Alright, so let's talk about the match. My first round opponent had a pretty strong Jedi Revan team, and like those relic levels are really high for the 2 million mark, and I didn't necessarily have a team that was going to be able to beat that. And he put them on defense, of course he did, and he also had a Darth Revan team. And so there was two really strong squads that he put on defense, and this was almost the entirety of my opponent's roster. And this really frustrates me to be able to see when people just stack their roster with these really strong characters, and that's, they put all their gear and all of their everything into it, and then they just put them on defense. Like, that's the most boring option there is. Like, maybe it's a sound principle in terms of like your overall strategy, because it'll get you wins if people can't crack either of your zones, and then all you have to do is like beat one of their teams. That's that's not too hard. And so my opponent probably had that in mind. I had to choose between which squad I wanted to be able to counter, and I decided to attack the Darth Revan team. It wasn't all the way there yet. It didn't have Malak, didn't have anything like that, and so CLS was more than a match for it. And my opponent didn't have much in the back zone, as you might expect. And so I decided to use my General Grievous squad here, and you'll note that my General Grievous squad was back on offense now. I wanted to mess around with my defenses a little, lighten them up a little bit so that I would be able to have more options offensively. Unfortunately, my General Grievous squad, even though Grievous is at gear 13 and Relic 1, this Revan squad was just too strong, and the supporting cast for my Grievous squad is just not strong enough. And so I don't really lose that battle too often, but I did decide that I wasn't going to mess with it anymore, and instead I would just try to take out this random Finn resistance team so that I could just get the points for being able to take the squad out. And then the back zone that my opponent had was really weak, and so I'd be able to clear a couple zones, and hopefully my opponent wouldn't be able to crack any of my zones, or at least if they did, they wouldn't be able to crack my top zone, the one that had two teams, because if they did, they'd probably end up winning the match. But this was a pretty easy fight. Took out that squad, and then I had a really weak Night Sisters team that I needed to counter. And so I kind of quibbled for a little bit, tried to decide, like, should I take Night Sisters? Should I take Phoenix. What should I take? And you can see I was a little bit indecisive here, looking back at my opponent's zones, seeing my different zones, and my opponent had attacked at that point, and, had kind of just failed on most of my squads, and so I just decided to pull the trigger with Night Sisters, and this Night Sisters team was ridiculously weak. My own Night Sisters aren't that strong, but they got 61 banners there because my opponent's Night Sisters couldn't do anything. My opponent ended up throwing 3 teams, and my Palpatine team had good target priority and took out Badstilla, but couldn't take out anyone else, apparently. And then they didn't even try my top zone with my hodgepodge Padme Nest power team up there, or my bounty hunters. So, and then I'm just showing my back zones just so that you guys can see what I'm doing there. I put my Ewoks there just because they can be pretty tough to counter. And then my Kira team is actually much harder to counter than you might otherwise give them credit for. I know that they're all Gear 7, but honestly, I think that they've lost either once or 0 times in the time that I've started using them on defense, and I know that will change eventually as I continue to rise up into new divisions and everything. But it is still a very solid squad defensively for this level, and I assume that you will see them continue to get good defenses a little bit later as well. So anyways, my second round opponent had a really strong Padme team with a bunch of relics, and they'd already attacked when I started this match. They had gotten through all of my teams except for the Ewoks, and apparently my Kira team did get taken out, so I guess we'll see what the defensive scores were. I think I took screenshots, but my opponent also had a Geonosian squad, and even though they didn't have a huge number of hit points or gear levels, like that was really strong. And then my opponent also had a really strong Jedi Revan team that they were just hanging out with on the top. So they actually had a pretty decent offense or defense, I should say, and they had clearly had a decent offense as well, being able to clear all of my defensive teams. And so I needed to win. Basically, I needed to clear my opponent, like full clear them. Fortunately, they had a little bit of a weak point with their Kenobi and their Jolie. They didn't have Gear 12 on them, and that's kind of the cutoff point for my General Grievous squad right now. Just because everyone else is so under-geared, General Grievous doesn't necessarily do that great against the higher gear levels at this point. I need to increase my gear on the droids first. But they were able to take out that Jedi Revan team pretty consistently and easily. And then we're just trying to, win this match as well. The Bastila squad, you would think, would maybe be a really good choice against Emperor Palpatine, but that's usually the case, except Bastila doesn't actually have her Zeta on her lead, and so you really have to get the jump on a team like this. Fortunately, my mods were a little better than my opponents, and I was faster than their Vader, so I was able to get a quick stun off on him and then just take out the rest of the team pretty easily. Now, the Geonosian match is pretty interesting and can be really difficult. Commander Luke does a really great job at trying to manage them, though, especially if you have Commander C-3PO. He's not a commander, hopefully. But if you have C-3PO there, it makes life so much easier because every time you're hitting with basic, you're also exposing. And so it was a relatively easy match, actually, because of that low gear level. But in the back here, we have a Phoenix squad, and my Gear 9 Night Sisters are up to the task. A lot of people are just stacking really, kind of subpar teams in the back, and I can't really blame them, especially at this level, but it does make it so that I can fairly dependably just beat all their strong teams in the front and then use my cleanup crew to be able to take out the back. And my opponent in this case had a lot of really strong teams. They put a lot of them on defense. They saved some of them for offense, and so putting a bad squad in the back isn't the worst thing, really. In this case, I thought this was kind of a funny match. I used Night Sisters to counter their Phoenix, and then I used my own Phoenix to counter their Night Sisters. And you should note that these Night Sisters are not very good at all. They're just not. Phoenix are actually a decent counter for Night Sisters if you have them pretty well geared, and I will say that they're a decent counter to Night Sisters up until like you get to the mid gear 12 level, and then Phoenix really start dropping off, and that's when Night Sisters truly hit their stride. At any rate, I was able to full clear my opponent on first tries on everything. They weren't able to clear my back zone, and so I took the win, and I was in the finals once again with my alt. I think that at some point I was going to hit Erodium, or maybe I already had hit Erodium, but being able to win that afforded me the opportunity to sit in the finals here, and the finals is where we're going to kind of slow things down. I'm going to go at normal speed, and we'll talk about the different matches. So going along with the theme of my opponents having really high relic levels, you can see here my opponent had a General Grievous nuke team that they were employing on offense for their arena team, and they were taking pretty high places. And so Relic 7 Grievous at this level is just crazy. It seriously, truly is really hard to counter that. And, my own Relic 1 Grievous is really hard to counter. But my opponent also had a strong Geonosian squad, and then a pretty strong Bounty Hunter squad. Like, they put a lot on defense, and I could see why they'd gotten into the finals. And, their mods were actually all pretty good as well, and I wasn't really looking forward to this match. Alright, so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about my decisions on which squads I was going to use against which other squads that my opponent had, and the thing that you'll notice right away, looking at my opponent's defenses, is that they had a really strong front. They had Gear 12 Bounty Hunters, they had a General Grievous nuke squad that was capable of climbing into at least the top 50, probably higher. They had a Geonosian squad that wasn't great, but is still really hard to counter for a lot of teams, especially for this roster. And so they kind of did me a favor in a way, and that is just because I didn't know who was in the back zones, but I didn't care. Like, I needed to use my 3 best teams on offense to be able to counter whatever was in the front zone, and so I knew that my Night Sisters and my Phoenix squad were going to be trying at least to take out my opponent's back zone. And that meant that I had 3 squads to mix and match against my opponent's front 3 squads, and so immediately I kind of narrowed it down and thought, well, okay, so General Grievous and the Geonosians are probably going to be a little hard for the Jedi Hodgepodge team to be able to work, and so the Jedi do really great against Bounty Hunters, however. And so I decided to just take my Jedi against Bounty Hunters, and that meant Commander Luke versus General Grievous. I really wasn't sure which one was going to be better. On one hand, they can both probably beat both teams, but Commander Luke, a lot of things can go wrong really fast against General Grievous, and my opponent's their General Grievous squad had a lot of really strong things going for it. It could do a lot of damage. Things could go wrong really fast without me actually being able to do that much damage to them. And so I decided my Commander Luke would do just fine against those Geonosians, and I could just try the mirror match against the General Grievous droids. That's something I've actually never done, even on my main account, and I've very rarely seen it happen. I know that I've seen a couple people on different streams try to use the mirror, and it's actually gone poorly, even though they had better Grievous squads, and so I wasn't really sure what to expect, but that's what I decided to do, and let's see how it goes. So we've got the General Grievous team first, and we just want to get that over with, and if I get completely destroyed, I'll have to kind of reevaluate what I want to do for my matches. And you can see the BB-8 gave them first turn, and so they're taking a bunch of turns, they're doing a lot of damage, and immediately I just wasn't sure. I did my AoE, and that killed BB-8, and then that killed that in turn let General Grievous go in and kill my Magna Guard, and that in turn gave my General Grievous the ability to kill the rest of the team, which in one shot, that's great, because you want to be able to take out General Grievous's guys all at once if you can with an AoE. That's not usually that possible, but on this team it was. And so being able to take out all of his support with an AoE at the same time really diminished my opponent's ability to really fight back against my Grievous, because their Grievous would be able to get one AoE off, and then after that it was just over. Like I still had support elements, and as their Grievous was killing other guys of mine, I would just be able to ramp up power on my own Grievous. So that match is actually pretty quick and easy. It was really fast. But let's talk about this match. Now, I could have probably used Jedi Revan on this and been able to be fine, even though I don't have his Zeta on his leadership. I took Bastila, even though she's no Zeta on her leadership, because I thought that I would probably be able to take out all of these bounty hunters before they were able to chew through all of my bonus protection. Now, one really huge threat against Bastila squads with bounty hunters, bounty hunters can absolutely counter Bastila squads, and almost the entire reason behind that is because Boba can do his execute shot, and it gets bonus damage every time it's killing off one of your buffs. And these Jedi squads have a ton of buffs, and so you really have to be cautious against teams with Boba, because he can just one-shot one of your characters. You think that you're doing just fine, and he'll go from like you've already taken him out once, and he's on death's door, and he gets one execute off, and he just goes all the way back up to full health, and he gets his bounty hunter resolve back again, and it can really be a huge mess, and something that you can't necessarily recover from, because you've lost a Jedi, and then they've regained their bounty hunter. So in this case, I was able to take out Boba relatively quickly. He always does his AoE first, which is unfortunate because, unfortunate for them, because they would have probably been able to take out one of my Jedi, or at least done a ton of damage to them if he had been able to just do execute first. But I wasn't gonna complain. This bounty hunter team did pose a slight threat to me, and you don't want to mess around when your Jedi Revan's only gear 9 with 1 Zeta. Like, it's not necessarily a great situation to be in, even against a bounty hunter squad. One of my favorite things in this game, in this game mode, is being able to see what's in the next zone. I really love being able to discover that. And in this case, I was extra excited because my opponent had put a steaming pile of crap in their back zone, and I was going to be able to counter it with either of my remaining, either Phoenix or Night Sisters. Alright, so Commander Luke against these guys, once again, it's not that tough of a matchup if you have C-3PO here and you have your rebels doing a decent amount of damage, which I do. And the first thing you want to do is stun the Brood Alpha. That's really important. Then you want to be able to do some damage to the Brute and do buff immunity on him so he can't get buffs. That means that he can't taunt when he inevitably counterattacks, and then you can just focus on one of the weaker Geonosians. And so you'll see that I'm targeting Soldier here. One thing that is really nice to do if you can is actually target Poggle and stun him. The reason is, if you don't, he can dispel the entire squad, and that's exactly what he did here, and that was kind of my mistake. I really needed to put a few more resources into Poggle and be able to manage him. However, luckily this Geonosian squad just was too low gear against my gear 12 Rebels team, and so it really wasn't that much of a threat, honestly, even though they got a few turns. Against the higher geared Geonosians, though, that could have really cost me the match, honestly. You really want to manage Poggle and Brood Alpha, just because both of those squads have their dispel ability, and that makes the entire squad be able to operate after you've disabled a bunch of it. And so my opponent did have Phoenix in the back. That seems like a common theme at this division level, and so I just decided to go with my go-to Night Sister squad against them. This was a little bit higher geared Phoenix squad, but they didn't really have any of their Zetas or anything. They also didn't have Sabine, and so this was not going to necessarily be a really tough match for me. You always got to be careful, though, because with Night Sisters, I don't have a ton of health at this point. You start getting a ton of health once you hit gear 12 and gear 13 and the relic levels and everything. But right now, good, solid. Like if you did an AoE, not that all of my Night Sisters would be able to do that, but if you do an AoE and all the Phoenix countered, there was an okay chance that one of my one of my guys would get taken down. And even though I have different redundancies involved, being able to revive in 3 different ways, it still can be a little bit risky. And so you'll see here I decided to target Chopper because every time one of their characters goes, like, he's giving them a bunch of healing, he's giving them a bunch of really good stuff, he's also giving them a taunt, and having to deal with that taunt is really frustrating for Night Sisters, for anyone really, because he's doing a taunt and then Kanan does a taunt, and they kind of their kits complement each other really well, so that usually, like, when one of them is about to come off of their taunt, then the other one comes on, and if they can just kind of 2-man team that and be able to keep you busy hitting their tanks, and meanwhile both of their tanks are providing a huge amount of health regeneration and everything, they can stall you out enough that their other members are theoretically able to do a bunch of damage. Now, against Night Sisters, you would really need Sabine to be able to do that, because she can throw her grenade and do a bunch of exposed damage, and potentially, her grenade hits hard even without exposed damage, and so she might be able to just take out a couple of the Night Sisters just through those grenades. But they don't have Sabine here, and I'm just fine with that. And we're just picking off team members one at a time here, just kind of based on their availability and their threat, and really like their health level. You can have certain Phoenix members be able to contribute to the whole just by having their unique Zated, and or not Zated, Omega'd, and then it contributes to everyone, so everyone's getting this pretty good ability, even though they're getting it from like a gear 8 guy. And so with this, with my own Phoenix, I was able to just take out Chopper and not have to use him at all, so I could get an undersized win. But that can be a little risky at times. You want to use all of the members of Phoenix if you can, just because all of Phoenix are gaining all of these different buffs from uniques, which I'm sure you guys already know. I mean, Phoenix is a fairly common squad, but I did want to just mention that they can be incredibly resilient at times, surprisingly so. Anyways, this Bosk team, they might have had some legs, they might have been able to do anything, accomplish something there, but their gear is just so atrocious in their star level. My opponent clearly was hoping that I wouldn't be able to clear their front zone. And so I was able to one-shot clear everything of my opponents. I actually got pretty good banners, all things considered, but I wasn't sure how they would be able to do against me. They did manage to get a hit in against my Padme and take her out, and otherwise they hit my Palpatine team and couldn't get through. They loaded turn meter, which is always fun to see, but getting that defense is nice. And then my Padme team, they one-shot it, so they must have used something strong. I actually don't remember what was in my opponent's roster to be able to do that, but then they failed once against my Jingo squad, and that was that. My Ewoks are in the back, and my opponent had no idea that they had multi-Zeta Ewoks in the back to deal with. And then also my multi-non-Zetaed Kira team was also in the back, just chilling, hanging out. Waiting to destroy noobs who dared venture into their territory. But at any rate, guys, I got the win. I beat all of my opponents in the finals once again. I was really close to Kyber. Now, something to keep in mind at this point in time is that I was giving some really serious thought to quitting with my alt. Just because of time constraints, and I have since decided not to do that. I'm going to keep playing with my alt and destroying people with it because I enjoy this game so much, and I ended up freeing up some other time, some other leisure time in my personal life, so I'm going to be doing that. But at this point in time, I was pretty sure I was going to quit with my alt, and so I wasn't doing any of the feats. I was logging in, I was getting my tickets for my guild, and otherwise I just wanted to finish off this season, get the videos done, and call it good. And so I was kind of lagging behind in in the Kyber chase, just because I wasn't doing all of the annoying feats, like, you know, winning all of your fleet matchups and arena matches and all this stuff. I just didn't care, frankly, and you know, that eventually that's going to impact my final rank. But nonetheless, like, I was pretty sure I was going to be able to make Kyber. I think I was a lock at this point in this league, just because even if I lost my next 3 matches, which I was pretty confident that I wouldn't, even if I did, though, I would still get a bunch of points for being able to clear my opponent's zones and stuff, and it's easier to get into Kyber at the higher divisions. And so, basically, had Kyber wrapped up. I was 9-0 going into the next round, and guys, stay tuned. I'm going to post that one up hopefully the next day after I post this. So, thank you guys so much for watching, and remember that in all things, Xaereth prevails.